Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. I want to introduce you to a new friend. Uh, I recently had to travel to Texas for oil and gas deal, and while traveling, I had a conversation, an initial conversation, and the guidance, the advice, the just leaning into helping me and opening up his brain and his experience to help me from even the initial conversation. I said, "You're a kind of guy that I'd like to really share you with my community based on your experience and some of the things you've accomplished. So let me first honor you, saying thank you for the kind of man you are, and then secondly, Mr. Cliff, welcome to the Deal Scout."
Josh, it's a pleasure to be here with your listeners. When you really bring the vibrantness to a community and you really care and you bring in high quality guests that really provide a lot of value, that's the magic. It's about giving back. It's part of our legacy, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Now you're experienced in the world of podcasting. Why don't we start out talking about podcasts? You
Okay.
know, because people will probably recognize, especially deal makers in the space, will recognize who you are if they haven't already by your voice.
I had the privilege of being the co-host of the Private Equity Profits podcast. Again, that's the Private Equity Profits podcast. And we've interviewed about, I guess it's 92 very talented PE guys. They're managing 30 million AUM, assets under management, to 3 billion. So it's a nice gamut. There's a concentration in real estate for many of the families that are, let's say they're putting money into the private equity, so they would be limited partners. Okay, and the private equity would be treated like a general partner. So podcasts work because it provides this richness for dialogue, to take ideas and thoughtfulness and really bring in knowledge in a nurturing way. I mean, with your fine work, realize our listeners could end up earning their MBA. Okay, think about that. The topics that we're covering on your podcast within the community is items that they do. And people may not be familiar with INSEAD, but INSEAD is the #1 university in Asia. It would be like a Harvard business school. And you look at the case studies, and the case studies are very, very positive. And it's what you're bringing up within your community at this point. It's real live, go to market, that integration piece. We're doing some M&A, thinking about it early. So podcast work.
Yeah. From the from having a podcast show, I've learned a ton. I've done probably 2,000 interviews over the years
Huge.
of doing this, and I feel so humbled and honored to be able to sit with very successful people and then ask them the questions that I have on my mind, heart, or maybe even specifically to the deals I'm working on. From being a podcaster, why did you get involved in it? And what were some of the great takeaways, as an experienced person? Like what were some of the value points that occurred in your life because of a podcast show?
I think it was really the broadening of knowledge on a multitude of topics. In other words, if you think about somebody that's managing $300 million assets under management, what does their due diligence process look like? There's a lot of deal flow out there, but some of the best deals we don't write checks to, meaning it's not a good fit. So when you really sit down with, excuse me, some really bright individuals and you listen attentively, they get to share their knowledge. And then you can ask, how did they get started? What was their learning they did? What would they have done different now where they are in their career? You and I, sort of in the green room, we spoke about the next generation. We really have a fiduciary responsibility to our youth to invite them into our organizations and provide internships. So, when you're looking at the podcast community, we are in a position where we can not just take our knowledge, but it's about sharing the community and being part of this ecosystem that we just literally making the world a better place. We really care about our listeners and what their needs are and what they're looking to learn and the challenges they're trying to solve. And I think that's really where it's positive. I learned a lot more about real estate because a lot of the folks, in the private equity space are managing large portfolios. It could be 6,000 doors, meaning it would be units like a condominium or multifamily. So just think about what that is, the price per unit, what the rent roll looks like, expenses, how to stay out of trouble. Okay, so in other words, if you're going to go in there and you're going to buy something and you're going to really running the numbers for the exit piece, that appreciation is going to take place, you can get jammed up on the cash flow and it's not really a good fit. So, the idea of what does it look like on your risk profile for deploying that assets into the industry. That was a very good learning curve that, hey, the best deals, they cash flow on their own. You make the improvements on the property, rent comes up. And at that point, you've got a real consistent, you know, property that's throwing off cash, profitable
Mhm.
cash back to the investors. Um, and then when you choose to do the exit, that's just the icing on the cake because you bought the deal correctly on the front end. And that was one of the takeaways that I really learned from the professionals that are doing this day in and day out.
Yeah. I was always, of the mindset, like I'll build something and then I'll improve it and it'll make money and appreciation will always go up. And I personally got uh, lost a lot of money when the market didn't appreciate in 2006, 7, and 8 because I was banking on appreciation of the marketplace. And as I got older and had a few more bumps and bruises, I learned that cash flow is pretty important, especially if you like to eat food and have, your light bills paid.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very valuable lesson for entrepreneurs and investors alike. Um, Kind of go through if we looked at your highlights, like it was an ESPN reel of all your highlights in your career.
All right.
What would that look like? We see Cliff's name and he's up at bat, and here's Cliff.
Well, let's talk about early days, and then I'll bring you forward. It'll be quick. Um, my family, we were working in the flea markets.
Yes.
So think about it, very, very grounded, middle America on Long Island, New York. But the family was very, very, there's five, siblings, just, there's five of us. And the ability to work collaboratively together, all right? Um, and we're still very, very, close and good friends. And some families have, dysfunction with the families within it because they just haven't figured out, you know, expectations, you know. But from the flea markets, I had the opportunity. I was talking to people all day long, on a Sunday. So I'm doing transaction. It's cash, it's credit cards, whatever it is. We reported the cash, paid the taxes. Not a big deal. You know, yes, everybody should be paying their taxes. Get yourself an accountant; they'll work with you. All right, you get to sleep well at night. It's a good thing. Uh, and then from there, I had the privilege. The family was in the printing industry, so that whole industry has radically changed. But I was an RIT graduate, so Rochester Institute of Technology, and I went through, a business administration to run a multi-million-dollar printing company was really the training. Yeah. And then I also had the privilege of interacting with the School of Photography, was attached to our printing program, so I spent time there. Um, One of the richness in that university was I was invited to participate in the webinars where the industry was coming in to learn about some of the newer technology that's there. And I'm sitting in and they're asking me questions about the curriculum that's in there because we realized most of the donations of all the equipment in the school was coming from the industry providers. So you could have a $600,000 or a multi-million-dollar color scanner because there was two in there, but now you can do that technology on Mac. Just think about that. So here's something where it's a Mac, a computer, a laptop versus, and those scanners, if you look at Time Magazine or Fortune or whatever it is, they were separating the photographs into colors and four colors. So you could actually go onto a printing press, web press to be able to print it to create those copies. So the whole industry has radically changed. Digital was brand new. So the idea of doing, you have a flag behind you, and it may have been printed digitally. That was brand new. Barcodes were brand new. UPC codes were brand new when I was in school. A lot of that came out over the targets. We open up a box and we see little unusual targets sitting on the flaps that originated out of that university. So you're just living and learning. And then they had one of the takeaways I'll leave here is Our history is so important. They had a room that had one of the original copies, the Gutenberg Bible,
Wow.
humidity control, temperature control, but there was a lot of original manuscripts sitting in that room. And it was your museum in essence, but you could go in there with white gloves on and you could actually leaf through first editions. So think about, we take a lot of things for granted. We're in a digital, generative AI at this point. But those early days that really got us started is the history. And, so if we take that knowledge and we bring it into business, not that much is really new. It's just the maturing of technology and moving into those digital. Are we going to move to something, I'm changing the topic a little bit, into intelligence, general intelligence at this point? The answer is yes, it's going to happen. Will it happen the next 3 years? Yes, I believe it will happen the next 3 years. I have some investments in AI, role model.ai is the company, but it's just it's just so interesting to see where we're going to be 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. So I've always had that visionary look on the technology. So, moving out of that school, I had started a promotional company, and and clients were very, very, I was very benevolent. I used to go into New York City to sell. So AA Publishing, the Detroit Pistons, Dodger Town, which is the Dodgers, you know, the Islanders, which is the hockey team, you know, Marriott. You're meeting some high-end VP levels of sales. The president of Sterling Drugs, okay, which manufactures Lysol and Bayer aspirin. At a young age, I had the privilege of interacting with some individuals that were very, very successful on their own right and were running organizations with a lot of responsibility. So I think that that was a foundational piece, going out and talking to people. So let's move forward to where I am now. I had the privilege of building and selling 3 companies. Okay, the last one I sold to a Fortune 500 company, and the money was really from KKR, which is one of the larger private equity, hybrid VC companies, one of the most successful companies out there. And it was a privilege to partner and work with their team. When you go to sell a company, it's always about the storytelling post sale and the integration. So that's one of the takeaways for our listeners is if you really understand that the buyer is buying future cash flow, okay, and they want the integration to be smooth and seamless. So those dialogues and questions that you're having early on, if you're easy to do business with, and trust is one of the foremost, prominent items that need to be sort of, delicately you're dancing together as you put these deals together. But be truthful, be honest, right? So the ability to write a business plan for the upside and submit that to the buyer and then actually close and execute on the business plan. I had the privilege of 11 times EBITDA. Right? That's not an accident. No, that was the planning, the execution post sale. Okay. So just think about, what does it look like when you're really looking to get a higher multiple? Our client, the buyer wants a payday. They may be financing with debt the acquisition piece, so they have to cover that. They may be infusing some cash to get you to grow further, which in this case KKR did. Okay. It was a privilege. You surround yourself with really, really bright people. We listen. And our jobs as CEOs, it's kind of interesting, is that vision, and we remove obstacles for our internal customer, which is our colleagues and team members. So I stress that. In other words, our job is what's the future look like to align the team, the culture, and remove obstacles for our team members. Where am I now? I had the privilege of written 7 books. 2 of them are really for the next generation. 2 are for how leaders can really focus on their teams to be high performing. The generative AI is sort of addressed in 2 of the books. I love Microsoft when it comes to using the word co-pilot. We're not looking to replace per se, but we could make our team members really intelligent and to do a lot of the automation piece. And they can spend their time on higher quality work, which actually has a financial return. When we talk about a financial return, how do we get an employee to understand they have a fiduciary responsibility for 10x? So if they're taking down $100,000 all in, they need to bring in or contribute 10 times that salary and benefits. I don't think anyone really has had that conversation with the team members at this point to understand, or help them understand how they make a contribution to the organization. How do we stay focused on, cash flow and getting paid and product fit, and marketing piece, customers that are related, meaning they're really, really happy. All right. Um, One of the positions I had, post acquisition, I was the VP of sales and marketing for a reverse logistics company.
Hmm.
So when somebody returns something to the store,
Mm-hmm.
that's reverse logistics. Forward logistics would be the brand new products in a box, nicely neat, packed on a pallet, shrink wrapped, and shipped into Walmart, Amazon, whatever it may be, or other retailers. Reverse logistics, things come back and they're not. Well, we know they're out of the box. Okay, not everything may be in the box, but I'll give you an example for our listeners. There's people that return, fans on your ceiling, and the fan blades are still on the fan. It's not going to go back neatly through the trucking or supply chain. All right, just think about it. It goes into a box, and people may not have known, but there's a word called Gaylord, which is the size of a pallet and about 4 feet high, and that's a box, a corrugated box, and the Gaylord, and they would just sort of products were mixed into those boxes, and they go back for disposition. The learning that took place and the opportunities for our listeners, I had over 250 employees reporting to me. We had 2 million square feet of space. Just think about what that means, to actually operate and fill those locations with. So when you go out to sell, it's the same amount of work to sell. And people may argue with this, and it's okay. When I opened up Walmart and Amazon, it was easier than smaller vendors. LG I opened up, DeLonghi, Breville, which is a small kitchen appliance company that's been acquired. Food Saver, Sunbeam, Revell, Mr. Coffee. It's just when you're looking at going out and selling the big boys, most people, when you look at an Amazon or a Walmart, they may not always understand the velocity of product that's flowing through their distribution centers into the retail or through the e-commerce. Amazon is delivering next day. Think about the precision they must have inside between the robotics, the technology, the team,
Mm-hmm.
and the carriers for next day delivery on such a large breadth of SKUs.
It's
Pretty exciting.
incredible.
Incredible, right?
Yeah.
They're a data company. So when you look at the generative AI and picking locations and where things are stored away, meaning where they are on the shelves, and how do you rack out your buildings, meaning you're putting in racks with robotics. So I have a client in Dubai, and they repair iPhones. And I'm trying to convince him the robotics is a way to work within the constraints of space and the amount of team members, because there's a fixed amount of visas that they can obtain. The robotics are coming down. You can get one for $200 to $500. They never take a bathroom break.
Mm-hmm.
They're there first thing in the morning. You can run them multiple shifts. So I'm not looking to displace people. I'm just saying, how do we go back to that generative AI where it's a co-pilot? So we have a co-bot, meaning
Mm-hmm.
it's a robot, but it's meaning it works with a human, but it's doing a lot of the redundancy work where it's not really the high value sometimes that needs to get put into it. It's more of that assessment or polishing or painting, or it's just interesting, when you start to pull back a little bit and you're working, sort of on the company versus working in the company.
Mm.
What are we really solving at this day? What is our customer or customer's customer needs? And that's what we're really solving at this point. In other words, we can make a hero out of our customers because we're helping our customer's customer. It's pretty neat. that we really are plugged into their ecosystem and we're passionate about helping our clients and their customers. So, back at that, with the 250 employees, reverse logistics with 2 million square feet, one of the takeaways, the learning that took place was from one of the engineers, VP of engineering from Hamilton Beach. The data coming back on why something was returned was extremely important. So I'm one of the foremost experts in the world on how to reduce product returns. Something out of either the out of the box experience, something probably didn't resonate with the customer. I mean, examples to that, and then why I'm drilling this home is sometimes we go out there with our marketing and we don't go to the other side of the table or the desk to see how it's going to be interpreted. You have, look at Mr. Coffee. They put a commuter mug underneath a coffee maker. The commuter mug's not in the box. Expectations when you go to buy buy that particular coffee mug is you're going to get a coffee maker and a commuter mug. Again, a large, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of product. Well, what does it do? It drives trailer loads worth of returns back. Another example would be same fine organization. They make some very good products. How do I know? Because we've de-engineered them. The flaps on a box. We open it up. Somebody's going to use a knife. You're not supposed to, but we use a knife to open up the tape. The inner flaps didn't match. So you're scoring the top of the reservoir on the plastic flap where you're going to put water in every morning. So every morning you could see that you put a gouge into the top of that flap where you put the coffee, or the water in the water reservoir. Tractor trailer loads of returns. Is it easy to fix? Yeah, it's less than a penny to fix it. But again, people, they don't see things, wiring, going close to heating elements, fire hazards. Not that particular company, that's a different company. It's just, what does it look like, with what you're building, and the expectations of a consumer. Are you really doing the focus groups to really understand expectations from a different point of view, different demographics? Happy customers come back and they're loyal. Anything else? I'll give you a foundational thing. To our listeners, only 3% of the world has their goals written down on paper. It pains me. Think about that. Only 3% of the world has their goals written down on paper. It takes about 15, 20 minutes to write your goals down. And you can go to my website. There's a couple of videos there, millionairelife.services. Again, that's millionairelife.services. When you have a vision of what the future is going to look like for you and your family, or for your enterprise, your colleagues, and you can articulate it, meaning you can write it down on paper. It can't stay in your head. It's got to be on paper. We make decisions all day long that are subconscious. We really aren't thinking about it. But if you took the time to write down what's important to you, which is really your goal setting, those small decisions to say yes or no to different opportunities that come up will focus on what was important that was written down on your goals, and it's subconscious. You're not really thinking about it. When you think about dreams sometimes feel really, really real. The brain really doesn't know what's real or not real per se. So if you focus on, hey, I wrote my goals down, and the brain is actually much more sophisticated than generative AI, all right? Why not put that wonderful, tool, our brain, to work to better our lives and to help us move forward for the vision towards success? Maybe you want to be a multimillionaire, maybe you want to raise a family and have children that are engaged, that are entrepreneurial, that are good citizens, that want to give back, right? Enjoy working on teams. It could be sports, it could be in Boy Scouts. Our daughters could be in Girl Scouts. There's some business clubs out there like DECA that the children can participate in. So these opportunities are all, when you're starting to interact with your peers and you're learning leadership, parents have a fiduciary responsibility to provide these opportunities. And I think, the two books I wrote for really for the next generation, really for the parents for the next generation, we need to spend quality time with our kids. There's no substitution. We can't really delegate it. So I figured out a way. I became a scout leader. So I'm wearing a uniform as a Boy Scout leader with the training. It was all free training, being a merit badge, counselor. And then I also coach sports for my boys. Okay. So when you think about quality time, I was doing things that were important to them and I was available to them during these activities. It was a privilege to serve, and we really do serve our colleagues, our family, our children. Okay. If you think about, and the Lord, you know, what is our legacy at the end of the day? Are your kids growing up to be wonderful parents and raising their own children? I have two grandchildren. That's the magic, guys. We can build our businesses, they could be super successful, but are you happy? And what's your
Mhm.
legacy going to be? It's all on the individual at this point. So you write your goals down, and you could break it up into categories. I'll share my categories. I did it when I was in my first year in college. An influential individual was Brian Tracy. So
Mhm.
Brian Tracy with goal setting was a privilege and a mentor of mine. I had a page for a wife. What were the characteristics I'd like in my spouse? I had a characteristics on a home, and income, boats, RVs, okay, travel. So each one of these were a different page, in a 3-ring notebook. Now I have exceeded everything that was inside those goals back in college, but that was the foundation to really build a wonderful, thriving life. It was not an accident. It was a plan and an execution based against the goals and my vision of success. And that's what I'm gently trying to say is, when our listeners listen, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to write your goals down.
Mhm.
You can go to my website, you can watch a couple of YouTubes. It will drill in really, really crystal clear why it works so well. And, you know, to me, it's fun watching other people do really well. In other words, it's a privilege to partner with, because I do executive coaching and mentoring. And I'll do it for youth. I'll do it for, executives that are looking to ascend, into their careers. I get into things like, stock options, revenue shares within a company, the mergers and acquisition piece. How do they fit in? What's the ecosystem? What's the culture within an organization? What's working? What's not? You know, so Josh, when you really look at what you've done in your career and the privilege I've had in my career, it's not an accident. There's been a lot of learning that took place through our careers. So with our listeners, you're not alone. In other words, we've been in your shoes. We care about you. We're
Mhm.
available to talk to you, and we want you to thrive. you know
Mhm.
and our
Yeah.
legacy is really empowering others to bring the best of them forward, even when they get into situations where they feel they're at a roadblock or it's complicated. you know One of the books I wrote was Mastering Anger. Anger holds a lot of people back. So when you look at the ability to understand that we get a feeling inside before we get angry. In other words, somebody pushed your buttons, or you think they did, and you have an opportunity to either react or not. So you need that 6-second rule. We try to teach our kids, hey, don't say anything for 6 seconds. Really process it. And I think that's one of the takeaways, when you look at it, is the ability to say to somebody, I feel you're trying to get me upset. I feel you want me to get angry. I feel, remember, I'm taking responsibility. I feel this way. It's not right or wrong. I feel this way. And that's one of the takeaways I want to share with individuals. You can diffuse a lot of things when you say, I feel, you are, and then you describe it. So, mastering anger really was the privilege of looking at the different age groups and how people mature and matriculate through their lives and where they are and where the insecurities come up. Um, you know, Anger between a husband and wife, is somebody using their fists. This is totally unacceptable. But sometimes the verbiage coming out of somebody's mouth can cut and hurt more than physical. So I'm just trying to say to with our listeners, we're not saying anyone's do anything, but if you witness something or you actually can step back a little bit and reassess, what's gone on in your life, they may not have been proud moments, but we have the opportunity to write the next chapter in our lives, the next chapter in our book, what happened in our prior life or, earlier, those chapters are written already. So you're in a position to make a positive impact going forward. So let's talk about financial. Getting wealthy is not hard. Okay. You need a plan. You need to surround yourself with really, really bright individuals. Now, one of the things I always do is I overpay my teams. A lot of times I will revenue share, profit share with my team. The goal is to get them overpaid a little bit. They stay, they play, we build wonderful organizations, and then we sell. Getting acquired creates great family wealth. Okay. When you're looking at investment banking, they're the conduit to allow investment money to be available to organizations that fit a certain criteria that they're ready to scale. Now, if you're going to use an investment banker, please understand they're going to charge you a fee on the front end to do the due diligence because they have a fiduciary responsibility because they're licensed, because they're broker dealers. Okay. So FINRA and the SEC would play a role in their licensing. They're also going to take a fee, meaning a percentage, a success fee of what they raise. And they're also going to take some warrants, which is like stock options, but they're on the outside of the organization. So those are considered warrants. They act the same or very similar to what stock options are, but outside the company, they call warrants. The warrants is really where they make their real money. They want you to be successful. They want you to come back and use them for another raise if you need it. They also want you to use them again when you want to get acquired. You want to put the company in play. So it's a long-term relationship with an investment banker. It's been a privilege to interact with them. They're good people. They're passionate. They'll help put together your data room, your marketing material. Are you really ready to sell or go out there and do the, sort of raise the capital? All right. You brought up something really important, Josh, early, which was cash flow is really the blood of an organization. We've got to make payroll. We got to do accounts payable. We got to pay our bills on time. So in creating incentives to get cash into the business early, it's not a problem. Getting a fractional CFO in early versus late. A bookkeeper gets you to a certain point, but sort of a fractional CFO can do a lot more on the projections of what your cash flow needs are. It's just, bringing in these resources. I didn't say full time. I said fractional. All right. Accountants sometimes could be a consultative accountant, or they could just be doing your taxes. Mm-hmm. Very, very different skill sets. Okay. We're really looking for somebody to do the analytics and the planning and the execution piece on what are we building? What's the cash flow look like? And what's the cash needed for the company to be able to scale? We need to know that ahead of time because most companies, we'll talk entrepreneurs, I'm the co-founder of Hyper Accelerator program. We've run 5,000 students through the program, so the Hyper Accelerator program. The companies that are going to scale really understand what the cash, meaning, is going to do for that organization. So the use of funds to scale the organization, and a lot of them don't understand, I got to go out and raise 18 months to 24 months worth of capital to be able to run the company, to get the fit. And the investment bankers and the VCs really want growth. They're looking to put gasoline into your company or onto the company, in essence, to allow you to flourish, to really scale. Okay. So if you're just getting by and your month over month growth, MRR, so monthly reoccurring revenue or the annual reoccurring revenue is not growing, why do you think the VC wants to put capital into your fine organization, or the investment banker wants to get involved in raising that capital? So you, as the owner of the company, you got to take responsibility for what's going on that marketing piece. Now, you could bring in some very, very talented fractional people to help you either pivot, reassess, help you with the team members, get the consulting, the mentorship you need. There's bright people out there.
So in sharing, thank you for sharing your story and then just over flooding us with wisdom. You mentioned built and sold three companies. You've been a part of a massive growth of innovation. You're now a co-founder to an accelerator. You wrote 7 books. There's a lot of you stepped over the side of the desk from entrepreneur builder to investor, and you've participated in that based on our past conversations. Kind of give an idea on what you've done in the world of investor, because you invest in the future of people, books, and the accelerator and stuff, but you've also been a supporter financially.
It's been a privilege to work with an angel group because I lived on Long Island. Okay, I'm in Connecticut right now, but so Angel Fire Venture, we have a bunch of very, very bright entrepreneurs, self-made individuals, came together and created a group. And we write checks. We'll also write something called a sidecar, meaning we're putting money into the angel group. The angel group is, voting on and deploying capital into entrepreneurial companies. And the sidecar will allow us to write additional checks to the same, let's call it, the entrepreneurial organization, to be able to further get an upside. And it's being adjudicated, meaning the money is being managed through the angel group. I've written 21 checks to date, so I'm seasoned. Companies like Buffer, which I don't know, they're a great company. I wish they would sell their company, but it doesn't want to. You're able to create one post in social media, and it'll push it out to a multitude of posts. And I carry 2 accounts, and I have 13 different social media accounts. You can see me on, if you just Google Cliff Locks, you'll see on LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, whatever it may be. And I put out a lot of video shorts that are informative. The companies that we used to fund early in the angel group could be pre-revenue. Think about that. So that had a higher level of risk, the profile. As we got a little bit more mature, we wanted a $1 million worth of ARR. So annual reoccurring revenue didn't have to be exactly 1 million, but you were scaling, so it would be $1 million worth of cash coming into the company. So that de-risked it, and when you start to get to 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, you start to have figured out your business model. Okay, you know who your customer is, you understand the value, what challenges you're solving for a client, you understand, your pricing models. All right, you understand the customer acquisition, you understand the word churn, meaning are you losing clients? Do you have to replace those clients, or are you really, they're loyal clients, that are really happy with what you bring to them in the market? So some of the companies I have written checks for, and I'm on the boards, as a board of advisor or a board of director, depends. Anything from rolemodel.ai, the idea that we've got a couple of thousand agents that automatically create the engineered prompts and can run a whole organization. Okay. You're looking at a young Black man that's 30 years old. There's people out there who want to talk about DEI, DEI, DEI. I'm like, you can actually find an entrepreneur that is from a community and actually invest and join his board. And that's the magic of actually benefiting the community as a large, and you're living in an ecosystem and help somebody scale. Okay. It's not about talk. No, it's actually being available to somebody that's, very, very bright and is building a successful organization. All our listeners have that ability to write a check. And then, and actually be part of somebody, a bigger organization than themselves, and to give back and to be a thought leader and really to care. I have an investment in a hydrogen company. We take seawater and we turn it into hydrogen.
Oh, neat.
Okay. We don't need to desalinate, which means to remove the minerals and salts that would be in water. It could be, now the unit itself will run tap water. It could run wastewater or seawater. Okay. And that's the unique piece that they're bringing to the market, is using composites versus something which is using platinum. Seawater will destroy today's alkaline or PEM units, which is the technology, two competitive technologies in electrolyzers that have the large market share at this point. There's a huge back order on those units. Will hydrogen solve all our energy needs? The answer is, let's be honest, it's a mix of fuels. It's natural gas, it's gasoline, it's diesel fuel, it's hydrogen, it's solar, it's big wind with turbines. When you put it all together, there's a fit for all of it. If you're going to go in there and just say, look, we're just going to go green. I sit in a lot of utility webinars. Mm-hmm. These webinars invite the media in, and these are the executives running our utilities that are generating the power and the distribution. If you decide you want to electrify everything, our utilities are not ready to do so. And the billions, well, the hundreds of billions of dollars that would need to be invested, the consumer and the businesses can't afford to do so. So you're creating a lot of stress in the utilities trying to figure out how are we going to electrify everything. And the economics just don't work. So if you go over to Europe, I have clients in Germany and Norway, and they 4x their utility rates. So just give that some thoughts. If you took today's utility rates, which are higher, they're higher. I'm in Connecticut. I think it's about 28 cents per kilowatt hour here. Okay. And you start to understand, not everybody is at the financial economic level as our listeners. So you've got folks that are in lower class, middle class, lower middle. They're paying the same utility rate. What are we doing? You're looking for that family to be able to look after them and allow their children to thrive and grow. But you're creating such a barrier when you raise the cost of, well, you understand inflation. We're sort of, I think, at the tail end of the Biden administration, depending on when you put this out. Inflation is toxic. It reduces the buying power across the board for all of us. It doesn't depend on what economic situation we're at. And the salaries are just not going to keep up to what the inflation is. So you're actually making everybody poorer. Our ability to buy has been reduced. This is a plan and an execution by an administration that's very, very concerning. So inflation is, you're actually printing more dollars out of thin air than you're actually creating value. So think about it. So you're raising prices, your salary is not going up, and you can buy less, and you're going into your savings. Others are using credit cards. Credit card debt is over $1 trillion right now. It's at a record highs. Okay. The question is, you can't, in other words, their interest rates on credit cards are 25, 30%. You can't get out from underneath that barrier. So, and the banks are sitting with over 50 billion worth of unperforming assets. It's not really visible out there at this point. No one's really talking about it. So I'm just trying to say, when we're looking at this, cash flow is king. We got to look after our team. We remove obstacles for our team members. We want our customers to be elated with what we're delivering to them. And we need to ask them what they need, because a lot of times they'll bring other opportunities in. So if I go back to that company with the reverse logistics, and I'm sitting in, Mr. Coffee, Food Saver, and Revell, Sunbeam, the same company, each one of the departments in that large company, so the engineering team, the marketing team, the product team, the sales team, all had different needs for the data that we were acquiring as we took back the product returns. The data sets for each one of these individuals, even if the price was cheaper to use a different vendor than us, it would be very, very difficult to unplug us because we're providing value to very different departments within that company. And it's a billion-dollar company. So just give some thought, what data can we share with the different department heads or teams that really helps embrace what they're doing so they can make intelligent decisions, the analytics, the predictive analytics that help them execute and be smart. In other words, so that's the value.
Yeah. I'm looking at your information right now and writing 7 books and a lot of this, and you believe in, you said we have an obligation, right? There's a difference between, I think, hey, we probably should do this, right? Like it's probably a good idea to invest in the future, but you're like, no, it's actually, you have a responsibility, an obligation. Like this is your job to create uh, future entrepreneurs or wealth creators or producers, right? Like you do this through your accelerator, but you also gear up your books to teach people about business and money and such like that. Why do you think it's your responsibility to worry about people of the future? Like why is that important to you?
The goals early on in my life, I never even thought about kids. So back in, in college, children weren't even on my radar at this point. I married
Really?
a wonderful woman, and I met her on the Long Island Railroad. So we'll get into a little detail, which is the railroad sitting that goes from Long Island. I met her on Valentine's Day on the way to New York City to a stationery show, which was at Jacob Javits. Okay.
Nice.
She and I had similar clients. We had exchanged business cards. I sent her 2 dozen roses the day after to where she worked.
That's
So I'm just
sweet.
trying to say to you, the Lord is kind of amazing that the goals were written down to find somebody with, it was her, that she met all, the criteria that I really wanted in my life. And I use the word, and many of our listeners probably did. We married up. We married a bright woman, you know, and the ability to understand we need to put our wives on a pedestal
Interesting.
and look after their needs. Again, we have a fiduciary responsibility to look after our spouses. They're, a happy wife, happy life. It's really true. All right. If you're struggling in your, I'm changing the topic and I apologize and I'll go back to what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I'll leave the listeners with something. Some of the early material from John Gray. So John Gray,
John Gray.
yeah, Men Are From Mars,
Yeah,
Women
yeah,
Are
yeah,
From
yeah, yeah.
Venus. We're really, really very, very different. So if you try to use your techniques of fixing things, I'm talking about a guy, it's not going to work well with our wives or fiancés or people we're, the individuals we're dating. We're different. Women get on something, and I'll be a little derogatory, but it's not 4-lettered or anything. Women get on a hamster wheel. They work things out by going around and around with the same challenge that they have. They'll get off the hamster wheel a day later, 2 days later, a week later. They'll get back on the hamster wheel a month later, 2 months later, 3 months, and they're still working out the same challenge. Me, when I bring something to Josh, I want a solution, man. I really want to fix this. I'm all ears and I'm attentive. It's not how our wives work. So it drives men nuts because you don't understand that's not how a woman, they're Venetians, they're hardwired differently. Just let them be who they are. And honey, I understand how you feel. That's it. They're not looking for Mr. Fixer. This will save you, well, it could be millions of dollars, depending on your net worth in a divorce.
Mhm.
All right. For some reason, you loved your wife. I mean, you got married, you had kids, let's say, but you just haven't figured out. No one's teaching you this at the university. Your parents didn't know, but Josh has been kind enough and invited me on, and now you know. All right. That
Yeah.
it's not you. It's just the way the Lord, sort of created men and women, and it's okay. All right. So let's go back to your question. The ability to understand the next generation, our children, is really why the Lord put us here on the earth. Right? For continuity of the human race, you need children.
Mhm.
Now, you could be mad at your kids, you could yell at your kids, or you could be proud of your children and give them a lot of positive reinforcement. It is a choice. It takes the same amount of time to yell at them and give them positive reinforcement. You can look for the good, or you can look for the bad. Okay. You really are in control as the adult, as the father or the mother, of what kind of a child are you going to raise.
Mm.
You think about it, I've got two grandchildren that are, 2 years old. One's going to be almost 3. And I'm watching my children raise their children. And I figured out, geez, I did something right. I'm proud of my kids, the way they're raising their kids. Okay. Now, what did I do early? They had their goals written down in high school on a write-on whiteboard board in their rooms. They went out and bought those with their allowance.
Mm.
They were planning and executing their success. So one of my sons is a primary engineer at Pratt Whitney running their innovation lab, working on jet engines. He's a mechanical engineer. He worked at one of the national labs on Long Island called Brookhaven National Labs on a particle accelerator, $300 million project. These weren't accidents. This was the planning and execution. Now they had to go out and sell themselves into these positions. And then he also had a job with Northrop Grumman in an innovation lab for sonar for the Navy. Well, this is public knowledge, so no NDAs or anything. So I'm just trying to say, when you're setting you're setting up those tools, those early goal setting for your children. He was good at stacking up VHS tapes. So you're starting to look how old he was, or blocks. Okay. Scouting played a role in their lives. The planning and execution, I was behind the scenes providing love, guidance, and caring and nurturing and opening doors. But that young person had to walk through those doors and sell themselves into those positions. All right. So the Northrop and Pratt Whitney, that's him, man. I mean, so, leaders, we care about others. In other words, that's one of the takeaways. To be nasty or something is not being giving. To be a SOB is not being giving. No, if you're a positive, outgoing, taking a deep interest in others, and hiring young people to internships, which I've had the privilege of doing. And then what happens over time is the interns stay in touch with you, and you see them building really vibrant lives. They build their own companies. You figured it out. That's your legacy. It's not about always writing books and stuff. No, it's about the individuals you touched in their lives, that they took something from your relationship, an interaction, and they grew into wonderful individuals, great citizens, and building their family, having their own kids. It gives me a lot of pride. I hope our listeners take that with them and say, I have time. That's all we have in life. We can't take 5 cents or 2 nickels rubbed together with us in the afterlife. We might as well build wonderful lives for ourselves, look after the next generation, be a good citizen, take an interest in some of the, thriving youth organizations, maybe sports, scouting, DECA, boys clubs, girls clubs of America. There's plenty of organizations out there where you can take your leadership skills an hour a week. In scouting, what was it? It was an hour a week, and we go camping once a month. I like camping. I don't have a problem sleeping in a tent.
Yeah.
Now, in the winter, I have something called Mr. Heater. It runs with the propane, and it kept the tent warm. So there's ways to work around, some of the, whatever it is with the environment or nature. One of the takeaways I'll give you is getting your children to really have a deep appreciation of nature. Spending time with them, taking hikes, bringing them to, farms, seeing, the goats are cute, you know, my early days as a youth, 12 years old to 16, I was part of the 4-H program. So 4-H, people may or may not know, but it was really, I lived on a farm during the summer, about 6 weeks out of the year. And I was running tractors and baling hay and, planting cantaloupes and eating corn out in the field. But it grounded me. All right. Just so you understand, sometimes we need to be grounded.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
That, a very high or ultra high net worth family. So very high, $10 million worth of assets. Okay. Without their primary residency. Ultra high net worth individual, $30 million worth of net worth. All right. Assets without the primary home. Sometimes you want to give your kids, you give your kids. But the question is, what are they going to do with those assets? You know, they're going to
Mhm.
buy a Lamborghini, a high-end Mercedes, private school. One of the wonderful ideas for our very high and ultra high net worth families is a young person. We can actually bring them into a private equity firm. They could deploy $1 million, $5 million worth of assets the family has, and they can co-invest with the private equity firm, or they can come to an investment banker. These people that are running the private equity firms, and how do I know this? I asked them when I was running the Private Equity Profits podcast as the co-host, would they take a young person in with some assets and put
Mhm.
their arm over their shoulder and actually be their mentor? And the answer was consistently yes.
That's awesome.
They need these business experiences. They need to learn how to be an entrepreneur. They need to learn how the family made its money and the culture, because realize it could be second generation money, third generation money. But one of the craziest statistics, and I'm going to wind down, is 60% of the wealth from the very high and ultra high net worth families is gone by the second generation. So 60% of the wealth is gone by the
Yeah.
second generation. And 90%, again, 90% of the wealth is gone by the third generation. To me, it means that we really haven't taken the time, the quality time with our youth in those families to turn them into entrepreneurs and want to build something and put people to work. All right. It's kind of easy to spend money, but to go out there and be an entrepreneur and build something, that's hard. Our
It's hard.
listeners know it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. Everyone would be an entrepreneur if it wasn't hard, and it's not.
Mm.
In other words, there's a small subset of the world that's an entrepreneur that's willing to go out there and really build a business and do it successfully. And I salute the entrepreneurs.
I do too. Yeah,
And
for
it's been a
sure.
privilege to be an entrepreneur. And it's been, is it all positive? The answer is it's always with learning.
Mm. That's for
Have I
sure.
been around some really, really bright people in my life? The answer is yes. Do I stay away from toxic people? The answer is yes. Does my book on mastering anger figure, look at that between aggression and anger? It really gets into understanding the difference between anger and aggression, okay, and how you're going to actually have a very, fruitful life. Your happiness is from within. One of the last things I'll share with you is what I tell the young people is go into the bathroom, point the finger in the mirror. That's who's responsible for you. It's not your mommy. It's not your daddy. It's you.
Yeah.
It's really your life. You can build it, you can shape it, you can form into a wonderful, thriving individual, have some fun, make yourself, a nice standard of living, have your family thrive. But it's not going to be an accident. You're going to need to plan and execute. So may our listeners take that away and bring that into their homes, into their businesses. And I wish them a lot of success. Reach out if
Yeah.
you want anything. I'm at millionairelife.services. Again, millionairelife.services. And I'm Cliff Locks.
Cliff, thanks so much for an overflow of wisdom and I could tell your heart to teach, your heart to serve, your heart to share. So appreciate you being who you are. Fellow deal makers, let's be that of gratitude and reach out to our guests. Say thanks for being on the show and sharing. If you'd like to learn more about what they're working on, their contact information will be in the show notes below this episode. If you have a deal or a type of deal that you'd like to talk about here on the Deal Scout, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, and maybe we'll get you on the show next. Till then, we'll talk to you all on the next episode. Bye, everybody.